what a lot of people think about is, stuff that gets thrown away or stuff that goes bad. I think people think about, you buy a whole bunch of produce at the grocery store and you take it home and then you don't cook it or eat it. And so then, that becomes food waste. But there's also a lot of food waste that happens from restaurants or food service operations where they just, it's very common to make extra food, right? As a chef or a food service operator, you never want to run out of food. So you have to make sure that you have enough, which means making a little bit extra. And then a lot of times some of that gets either wasted, doesn't get used fully for its purpose, or just, can go bad as well if it sits in the fridge for a long time.
Yeah.
So for one, I think we are just producing a lot more food than we used to. We have figured out how to produce a lot of food fairly cheaply, and so we do that. And again, we make sure we have enough. But the problem is that there are people who don't have access to, the great variety of food that we can produce. And so a lot of times we are simultaneously wasting food, and also there's people who are going without. So that to me is a big issue. Well, because anytime you have waste, you're spending time and energy and resources, creating the food, growing the food, processing it, and packaging it. And if we have too much food on hand, maybe we don't need to spend all that time and money up front. And at the same time, again, a lot of people are going without, and they're not able to either afford food the way it's being processed at this point, or they're just not able to get access to it. And so it's sort of like that double problem. Again, we have too much, but also people are still going without, even though we have the capability of making a lot of food and making enough food to feed everybody in the world. And so it's a problem in the US, but it's also a problem around the world, especially around the world. I can't think of any. I mean, again, we kind of have to have a certain amount built in, right? When we have an event, especially like a catering event, right? You have 100 people that you're supposed to feed at this party. You have to plan for 120. You have to make food for 120 just to make sure somebody, if everybody brings their brother or their cousin, then you're going to have 120 people there wanting food. And you never know who's going to want extra, who's going to want seconds, that kind of a thing. So we do plan for extra, but it would be nice if that food did not go to waste, right? And again, food is key. I don't think it's okay when we have people who are going without. If everybody had plenty of food to eat and we still had a little bit of waste, then we could just make better compost, right? And grow better food. But we're maybe also not doing that. So at this point, we're not at a point where we can say that the food waste that we have is okay. That's a good question. I don't know if it's greater there in comparison to like the general population. A lot of times we see food waste from farms to the grocery stores because people, when they shop at the grocery store, they want their produce to look really nice, right? Everything should be pretty and uniform and the right size and all that. But we use as much as we can from the farm, right? And we're okay with ugly peppers and onions that are a little bit smaller than the ones we get at the store, kind of a thing. So we have a little bit less waste in that sense. On the other hand, we still have waste. It comes back to the same thing that happens when you prepare for a meal and you want to make sure that everybody has plenty to eat, especially when we're talking about very active young people, right? Who eat a lot of food, and sometimes they eat a lot of food and sometimes they're not as hungry. And so it can be, even though we know how many people we're planning for on a daily basis, we still struggle with that food waste issue. of having too much made after meals. So, you know, it's hard to say if it would be better or worse than what the general situation is like.
Purpose.
Yeah, that's a good question. We do not have a great compost program at camp right now because we tend to, it is difficult to have a good compost program.
Mm-hmm.
We have a pretty good one here at school because we can, you know, teach about what is supposed to go into the compost. And at camp it's a little more complicated. You know, it's difficult to make sure that only the right stuff goes into the compost, although you might think it would be easier. But it's something we're kind of working towards. So that's one. And then, you know, we do some leftovers. We try to make sure that we have some food, or if we have a whole bunch of food, you know, say for instance we have a pasta dinner, we have a lot of pasta left over, we will use it in the next day or two for a pasta salad, that kind of a thing. So we do that as much as we can, and for some things it works and for some things it's just not as practical. So we do our best, but I'm always looking for better ways to make sure that we're using the food that we have. Again, I think you run into that situation everywhere. You know, food waste is a problem kind of everywhere, and especially here as a teaching institution. You know, we make a lot of food and we don't always have an outlet for it. We also, you know, we even when we have events, again, we run into the same thing where we just have too much food. We make a little extra, and then we have some food left over, and so we have some things like that. So it's definitely an issue, although we've tried to work with it as best as we can in terms of making sure that our requisitions are just right for the number of students we have in class, that we plan as well as we can for meals and events, and that we do use as much as we can in the compost. So I think we do okay, but you know, it is just a problem everywhere. So it's something that would be nice to have more attention to.
All right.
You know, trying to plan what you're gonna eat for the week, it makes a big difference whether you go to the grocery store like without a plan and you just say, oh, that looks good, that looks great, versus, you know, sitting down and figuring out, well, I'm gonna cook these 5 recipes this week, and I need these ingredients and I need this much. And so if you do a better job of planning before you go to the store, I think you do a better job of actually using the products that you buy and then making sure that they don't go to waste. So meal planning is a big one for me, and trying to use leftovers. A lot of people don't like leftovers, but you know, I find that if you make something and it's fresh, you know, you've just made like this big pot of soup, if you go ahead and put the leftover stuff right away into the freezer, it stays really good. And so you don't get like that, oh, it's been in the refrigerator for 3 days problem when you've, you know, actually taken care of it and it's still, you know, kind of at its best quality. Get it into the freezer, then it stays good. And then it's frozen, so you don't have to eat it the next day and the next day and the next day. You can eat it, you know, next week or 3 weeks from now, and then it's, you know, actually kind of, oh, this is nice. This is something I haven't eaten in a while. That can be more difficult because, again, you know, if you're going to a restaurant and you're paying a certain amount of money for a nice dinner, right? Do you want to be served left